The sound of breaking glass at 2 in the morning isn't something you forget. Trust me on this one. I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering like a construction crew, and stumbled to the window. What I saw next? Well, if you're watching Conflict Story, you know it's never just a misunderstanding. My pond was lit up like a carnival, red floodlights, bright as highway flares, cutting through the October fog, and floating right there in the middle of my water, the water I'd been fishing in since I inherited this place from Dad, was a massive inflatable sign. Karen's Lake, grand opening. 20 feet wide, impossible to miss. 2 women in yellow rain slickers were down by the shore, methodically spray painting over my wooden signs. The older one, thick around the middle with that bossy blonde haircut I'd seen around town, barked orders at the younger one. Had to be mother and daughter. The kid, maybe late 20s, held a phone up like she was filming everything. "Mom, what if he calls the cops?" the daughter asked, not bothering to whisper. "Let him try, honey. Tomorrow morning, this is going to be a private beach." Karen Sr. didn't even look up from her spray can. Rich people pay good money for lakefront access. I threw on jeans and boots, grabbed my dad's old fishing net from the garage. The cold air hit my face like a slap. The smell of acrylic paint mixed with that damp October chill you get near water. My breath came out in puffs as I jogged toward them. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Both women turned. Karen Sr. straightened up, paint can in one hand. That entitled smirk I'd learned to recognize from every homeowner association meeting. "Oh good, you're awake. Saves me a trip to your door." "Get off my property now." "Your property?" She laughed, actually laughed. "Check your deeds, sweetie. This waterfront became public access last month. County rezoning. We filed the paperwork 3 weeks ago." The daughter kept her phone pointed at me. "He looks really mad, Mom." I felt my hands clench. You ever have that moment where everything you thought you knew just shifts under your feet? Like when you realize the ground you're standing on isn't as solid as you believed? That pond has been in my family for 70 years. Was in your family. Now it's a business opportunity. Karen pulled out a folded paper from her jacket pocket. Official permit for commercial recreation use. Karen's Lake Resort, LLC. We start taking reservations Monday. I snatched the paper, held it up to the floodlight, looked official enough, county seal, signatures, the whole deal. But something felt wrong. The signatures looked too perfect, like they'd been photocopied rather than hand-signed. This is fake. That's what everyone says when they lose. Karen's daughter finally lowered her phone. We did our homework. 3 months of research, zoning meetings, environmental impact studies. You should try it sometime. Behind them, I noticed something that made my blood run colder than the October air. My dad's old fishing bobber, the red and white cork one he'd tied to a string and hung from the willow branch when I was 8 years old. It was still there, swaying in the breeze from their boat motor. 43 years it had hung there, 43 years of memories, of teaching me to cast, of quiet Sunday mornings before Mom died. Karen noticed me staring. "Oh, that old thing? We'll clean up all the junk tomorrow. Can't have trash floating around a premium recreation facility." Something inside me snapped, not anger, something colder, more focused. "You want to play games with paperwork? Let's play." I pulled out my phone, started taking pictures. The signs, the equipment, the inflatable advertisement, both their faces. Smile ladies, evidence collection. Evidence of what? We're not breaking any laws. But Karen's voice had lost some of its confidence. Vandalism, destruction of private property, trespassing. Take your pick. I kept snapping photos. Plus, whatever environmental violations come with dumping commercial equipment in a private water source. The daughter grabbed her mother's arm. "Mom, maybe we should finish what we started." Karen's jaw tightened. "You go ahead and call whoever you want. Our lawyer says possession is 9/10 of the law. By tomorrow morning, we'll have paying customers and a fully operational business. After that, good luck proving this was ever yours." They climbed into their boat, leaving the floodlights running and that massive sign bobbing in my water like some kind of victory flag. The sound of their motor faded into the distance, but the red glow stayed behind, turning everything the color of anger. I stood there for a long time, listening to the water lap against the shore. Dad's bobber swayed in the light, a ghost of better times. Have you ever felt like your whole world just got pulled out from under you by people who smile while they do it? By morning, I was going to find out exactly what Karen's Lake Resort was really about. The floodlights were still burning when I walked back out at sunrise. 6 hours of sleep, maybe 2 hours of actual rest. The inflatable sign looked even more insulting in daylight. Bright yellow letters against electric blue, floating there like it owned the place. I was sipping coffee on my porch when the work trucks started rolling in. First a flatbed with lumber, then a crew cab full of workers, then a portable toilet company. Karen wasn't wasting any time. The crew chief, a sunburned guy in a hard hat, walked straight up to my property line. "You the owner here?" "That's right." "Got orders to put up a fence, property access control?" He unrolled a set of plans. "Going right along this line here, blocking off the trail to the water." I studied the blueprint. "This trail's been public access for 30 years. Everyone in the county uses it." "Not anymore." He pointed to a signature at the bottom. "County commissioner signed off on private commercial zoning. Your neighbor lady, she's got exclusive use rights now." Within 2 hours, they had a chain link fence running right across the walking path. 8 feet high, topped with barbed wire like some kind of prison camp. A brand new gate with a heavy padlock and a sign that made my stomach turn. Karen's Lake Resort, private property, 50-hour access fee. That's when Karen Sr. showed up with her clipboard and that smile that could curdle milk. "Morning, neighbor. Hope we didn't wake you with the construction noise. You can't block a public trail." "Public trail?" She flipped through papers on her clipboard. "According to the county, this is all private waterfront property now. But don't worry, we're offering very reasonable rates for local residents." A pickup truck pulled up behind her. The driver rolled down his window. "Is this where we pay for fishing access?" "That's right," Karen beamed. $50 gets you 3 hours of premium lakefront recreation. Bathrooms, picnic tables, boat rental available. She pointed to a small fleet of rowboats they'd somehow managed to launch overnight. The driver handed over cash without hesitation. Finally, somewhere quiet to fish without crowds. I watched my pond, my father's pond, turn into a business transaction. "You have no legal right to charge people for this." "Actually, I do." Karen held up an official-looking document. "Commercial recreation permit, issued by the state. Everything's completely legitimate." More cars were pulling up. Families with coolers, kids with fishing poles, couples looking for a romantic boat ride. Within an hour, there were 20 people on my shoreline, and Karen was collecting money like she'd struck oil. My phone rang. Tom Brewster, my neighbor from across the road. "Hey, buddy, heard about the new fishing spot. Mind if I bring the grandkids over this weekend?" "Tom, that's my pond." "Come on, don't be like that." Karen explained everything. She's just trying to give families a nice place to enjoy nature. $50 isn't much for a whole afternoon. I hung up and called my other neighbor, Janet Mills. Same story. Word was spreading through town that there was a new family recreation area, professionally managed, much better than the old unregulated fishing hole. By noon, I had 6 missed calls from people wanting to make reservations. Karen walked up to my fence line, counting a thick stack of bills. "Not a bad first day. You should be proud. Your little pond is finally reaching its potential." "This is fraud." "It's business, something you might want to learn about." She tucked the money into her purse. "Oh, and just so you know, we've got a social media campaign launching this afternoon. Professional photographer coming tomorrow for the grand opening shots." She pointed to her daughter, who was setting up what looked like a professional video camera near the boat dock. "Madison's got 40,000 followers on her lifestyle channel. Once she posts about Karen's Lake Resort, we'll be booked solid through Christmas." The smell of charcoal drifted over from where someone had started grilling burgers. Kids were laughing, splashing in the shallow end. Couples were taking selfies with the scenic backdrop. It looked like every family gathering I'd ever dreamed of having at my own pond. Except none of these people knew it was stolen. "You can't keep this up," I said. "When people find out you're lying..." "About what? Having proper permits? Providing a safe, clean recreation facility?" Karen gestured toward the crowd. "Look at those faces. These people are happy. Their kids are having fun. What exactly am I lying about?" Madison approached with her camera equipment. "Mom, I got some great shots of the families. The lighting is perfect with those trees reflecting in the water." "Wonderful, honey. Make sure you get some footage of the pristine natural setting. People love that authentic outdoor experience. I watched my father's fishing bobber drift past a family of strangers, still hanging from its string after all these years. The red and white cork that had marked countless Sunday mornings, now just part of someone else's scenic backdrop. That afternoon, I drove to the county courthouse to check those permits myself. The clerk pulled up the files on her computer, frowning at the screen. That's odd. I show the paperwork was filed, but the approval process is still pending. Says here it won't be reviewed until next month. So the permits aren't valid yet? Not technically, no, but someone marked them as approved in the system. She clicked through several screens. This is strange. The approval timestamp is from last weekend, but the commissioner who supposedly signed off was out of town at a conference. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Can you print me copies of everything? Walking back to my truck, I had the documentation I needed to shut down Karen's operation, but I also had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning, because when I got home, there were news vans parked along my street. The news vans hit my street like vultures circling roadkill. Channel 7, Channel 12, even the regional cable station. I pulled into my driveway with those courthouse documents burning a hole in my jacket pocket, watching reporters set up cameras pointed at my front door. A blonde woman in a business suit marched straight toward me, microphone in hand. Mr. Miller, Sarah Chen, Channel 7 News. We'd like to get your response to the allegations. What allegations? That you've been illegally blocking public access to recreational waterways. That you've threatened local business owners trying to provide family-friendly services. She thrust the microphone closer. Is it true you've been intimidating visitors, including children? I stared at her. Are you serious? We have video footage of you confronting the property owners this morning, using aggressive language and threatening behavior. She nodded toward her cameraman. Would you like to see it? The camera screen showed me from that morning. My conversation with Karen by the fence, but edited to remove all context. Just me looking angry, pointing fingers, my voice raised. Without Karen's words, without the explanation of what was happening, I looked like some kind of unhinged property dispute bully. That's not what happened. So you deny threatening Ms. Davis and her daughter while they were conducting legitimate business? Over her shoulder, I could see Karen by the pond, giving an interview to another news crew. She'd changed into a flowing sundress and had somehow managed to look like a concerned community advocate, rather than someone who'd been spray painting signs at 2 a.m. The truth is, Karen was saying to Channel 12, we're just trying to create something positive for families in this area. Somewhere safe for children to experience nature, with proper supervision and safety measures. Madison stood beside her mother, looking young and innocent, nothing like the person who'd been filming me in the dark. My mom spent months getting all the proper permits and approvals. She really cares about environmental protection and community access. And Mr. Miller's response to your efforts? The reporter prompted. Well, I don't want to speak negatively about anyone, but he's been very hostile from the beginning. We've tried to work with him, but Karen let her voice trail off, the perfect picture of reasonable people dealing with an unreasonable neighbor. Sarah Chen turned back to me. Ms. Davis says you've been harassing local families, trying to chase them away from public recreation areas. Do you have a response to that? This isn't a public recreation area. It's my private property. Do you have documentation proving that claim? I pulled out the courthouse papers, but before I could explain what they meant, another reporter pushed forward. Mr. Miller, is it true you called the police on children who were fishing yesterday? I never called the police on anyone. We have confirmed reports that multiple families felt intimidated and unsafe due to your behavior. Some parents had to cut short their children's outdoor activities because of your confrontational approach. The circle of cameras and microphones tightened around me. Every question seemed designed to make me sound like the villain in a story I didn't even recognize. Behind them, more families were arriving at the pond, kids running toward the water with their fishing poles, parents pulling coolers from their cars. The real question, another reporter chimed in, is why one person thinks he can deny recreational access to an entire community. I looked past the cameras toward my pond, where my father had taught me to tie fishing knots, where I had scattered his ashes 5 years ago, where I had been planning to bring my own grandchildren someday, if I ever had any. Karen waved at me from across the yard, that same smug smile she'd worn while vandalizing my property. She'd turned the whole situation upside down. In the span of 12 hours, I'd gone from victim to villain, from property owner to community enemy. "Mr. Miller," Sarah Chen pressed, "any comment on why you're trying to block families from enjoying nature?" I wanted to shout about forged permits and middle-of-the-night vandalism, about fake approvals and stolen property rights, about my father's bobber still hanging from that willow tree, marking 43 years of memories that were being sold for $50 an hour. Instead, I said nothing, because I was learning something about modern warfare that my father's generation never had to deal with. The truth doesn't matter if the other side controls the story. No comment. I pushed through the crowd toward my front door. "Mr. Miller, are you planning legal action against these families? Will you be seeking to block recreational access through the courts? Do you have any concern for the children who just want to go fishing?" I slammed the door behind me and watched through my kitchen window as the reporters turned back to Karen. She was holding court now, surrounded by cameras, gesturing toward the pond like she was describing her life's work instead of a criminal enterprise. My phone started ringing. First call was from my insurance agent. "Tom, I'm getting some concerning reports about confrontations on your property. We might need to discuss liability issues if there are ongoing disputes with the public." Second call was from Janet Mills, my neighbor. Her voice was cold. "I saw the news, Tom. I had no idea you felt that way about families trying to enjoy the outdoors. My grandchildren were asking if they could still come fishing, and honestly, I don't know what to tell them." Third call was from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Attorney James Crawford. I represent several families who feel they've been harassed and intimidated while attempting to use public recreational facilities. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss a potential resolution." I hung up without responding and walked to my back window. Karen was leading what looked like a tour group around the pond, pointing out features like she'd designed the whole ecosystem herself. Madison was filming everything, probably for her lifestyle channel. The sun was setting behind them, turning the water golden. It was the most beautiful my pond had ever looked, full of life and laughter and families making memories. And none of it belonged to me anymore. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just stealing my property. She was stealing my story, my history, my future, and she was making the whole town believe I was the bad guy for trying to stop her. But here's something about being cornered that people don't understand until it happens to them. Sometimes it makes you dangerous. I spent that night on the internet, digging through every county database I could access, property records, zoning documents, permit applications. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Karen's LLC had been registered only 6 weeks ago. The environmental impact study she'd mentioned, filed but never completed. The zoning change, applied for but still under review. Every single document that gave her the right to operate was either pending, forged, or non-existent. But here's the kicker. She'd been smart about it. Smart enough to make everything look legitimate on the surface. The permits had official-looking seals. The signatures matched county records. The filing dates all seemed proper. Someone who knew the system had helped her build this house of cards. By morning, I had enough evidence to shut her down. I thought I had enough evidence. I called the county zoning office at 8 a.m. sharp. "This is Rick Morrison, Code Enforcement. How can I help you?" Young voice, eager to help. Perfect. "Rick, I need to report an illegal commercial operation, fraudulent permits, operating without proper approvals. Can you give me the address and business name?" I provided the details, explained about the forged documents, the pending approvals that were being treated as final. Rick listened, took notes, promised to investigate immediately. "We take permit fraud very seriously, Mr. Miller. I'll be out there this afternoon to shut them down if what you're saying is accurate." I hung up, feeling like I'd finally caught a break. Truth and documentation would win out over Karen's lies and media manipulation. The system would work the way it was supposed to. 2 hours later, Rick Morrison pulled up in a county truck. I watched from my kitchen window as he walked over to Karen's setup, clipboard in hand. Official business, no nonsense. Karen greeted him like an old friend. They talked for maybe 10 minutes. I couldn't hear the conversation, but their body language told the story. Rick was nodding, Karen was smiling, Madison was showing him something on her phone. No confrontation, no shutdown, no enforcement action. Rick walked back to his truck and drove away without even glancing toward my house. I called the county office again. Code enforcement, this is Rick. It's Tom Miller. What happened with the investigation? Oh, that? Yeah, I checked it out. Everything looks legitimate to me. All the paperwork's in order, proper approvals, environmental clearances, the whole deal. That's impossible. I have copies of the real documents. The approvals are still pending. I'm looking at the final approved versions right here in my system. Signed off last Friday by Commissioner Walsh. Rick's voice had changed, become more formal. Is there anything else I can help you with? Can I see those approved documents? You'd need to file a Freedom of Information Act request. Takes about 2 weeks to process. 2 weeks. Karen would be fully established by then, with paying customers and media support and everything looking completely legitimate. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the evidence I'd gathered, wondering how documents that didn't exist yesterday could suddenly appear in the county system today, wondering how a young code enforcement officer could look at forged permits and see legitimate approvals. That afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my insurance company. Tom, this is Mike Henderson, your agent. We've got a problem. What kind of problem? I received a complaint this morning. Apparently there was an incident involving you and some families at a local recreation area. Threatening behavior, aggressive confrontation, potential liability issues. Mike, that's not what happened. They're running an illegal operation on my property. According to the complaint, it's a properly licensed recreation facility. The family that filed the report has photos and video of you making threats, using intimidating language toward children. I felt the ground shifting under me again. What family? I can't share those details due to privacy concerns. But, Tom, I have to ask, have you considered anger management counseling? Because right now, your homeowner's policy might not cover incidents arising from the confrontational behavior. After Mike hung up, I walked outside to check my mailbox. 3 letters waiting for me. The first was from a law firm representing multiple families seeking relief from harassment and intimidation. The second was a notice from the Homeowners Association about neighbor disputes affecting community reputation. The third was from the county, informing me that my property taxes were being reassessed due to increased recreational usage and commercial activity in the vicinity. Karen had turned me into the neighborhood problem. I looked across at the pond where families were enjoying paddle boat rides and kids were catching bluegill from the dock Karen had somehow managed to install overnight. Professional-looking signs pointed toward restrooms, picnic areas, and a small concession stand that definitely hadn't been there yesterday morning. Madison was interviewing happy customers for her social media content. Parents talking about what a wonderful family destination they had discovered, how well-maintained everything was, how grateful they were to have access to such a pristine natural setting. It's so rare to find somewhere that's both beautiful and safe for children, one mother was saying. The owners really care about creating a positive experience. That evening, I got a call from my neighbor, Tom Brewster. Hey, buddy, I wanted to apologize for yesterday. I didn't realize you were going through some personal stuff. What personal stuff? Well, the stress, the anger issues. Janet mentioned you might be dealing with some health problems. Mental health challenges can be really tough, especially for guys our age. Tom, I don't have anger issues or mental health problems. I have neighbors stealing my property. Silence on the other end, then, listen, maybe you should talk to someone. Professional help, Because the way you've been acting lately, some folks are getting concerned. After he hung up, I stood in my darkened kitchen, looking out at my father's pond lit up like a theme park. Karen had built more than a business. She'd built a story where I was the unstable neighbor, the community problem, the guy who couldn't handle other people's success. And somehow, everyone was buying it. The red and white bobber still hung from its willow branch, barely visible in the floodlights. 43 years of memories reduced to a piece of trash that needed cleaning up. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. Karen wasn't just stealing my pond, she was stealing my sanity, my reputation, my place in the community, and she was doing it so skillfully that I was starting to question myself. But crazy people don't usually have documentation proving they're right. I pulled out those courthouse papers one more time, studying every stamp and signature by lamplight. Somewhere in this maze of bureaucracy and lies, there had to be a way to turn the tables. Because if Karen wanted to play games with official documents, I was about to show her what real research looked like. At 3 in the morning, I was still hunched over my laptop, following a digital paper trail that led down rabbit holes I never knew existed. Coffee had turned to energy drinks. Energy drinks had turned to pure stubbornness. But I was on to something. The breakthrough came when I cross-referenced the approval signatures on Karen's permits with the county commissioner's actual whereabouts. Commissioner Walsh had supposedly signed off on the recreation permits last Friday at 2:30 p.m., but his calendar, publicly available on the county website, showed him giving a speech at a water conservation conference in Denver, 300 miles away. I dug deeper. The digital signature on the permits traced back to an IP address registered to a private consulting firm called Regulatory Solutions LLC. Karen's business address, same building, different suite number. By dawn, I had a conspiracy mapped out like a detective novel. Karen hadn't just forged permits. She'd hired professionals to forge them. People who knew the system well enough to backdate approvals, insert false entries into county databases, and make illegal operations look completely legitimate. But I also had something else, the name of every county official who had supposedly signed off on her paperwork, and their real schedules, their real signatures, their real contact information. I started making calls at 8 a.m. Commissioner Walsh, this is Tom Miller. I need to ask you about some permits you signed last Friday. I didn't sign any permits last Friday. I was in Colorado all week. That's what I thought. Someone used your digital signature to approve a commercial recreation facility on Maple Lake Road. Silence. Then, Mr. Miller, if what you're saying is true, we're looking at criminal fraud. Can you email me the documentation? By 10 a.m., I had 3 county commissioners, 2 zoning officials, and a state environmental inspector, all confirming the same thing. They'd never approved Karen's operation. Their signatures had been stolen, their authority had been impersonated, and someone was about to be in serious legal trouble. I was feeling pretty good about myself when Rick Morrison showed up at my door. Mr. Miller, I need to speak with you about filing false reports with county officials. The young code enforcement officer looked different today. Less helpful, more official. I received several complaints this morning about you harassing county personnel with conspiracy theories and unfounded accusations. Those aren't conspiracy theories. Those are documented facts. According to my records, all permits for Karen's Lake Resort are valid and properly approved. What you're doing could be considered obstruction of legitimate business operations. I showed him the evidence I'd gathered, the timeline proving Commissioner Walsh was out of state, the IP address tracing back to Karen's consulting firm, the digital signature analysis showing forgery. Rick glanced at the papers without really reading them. This looks like a lot of speculation and personal vendetta material. I'm going to recommend you contact a mental health professional before this situation escalates further. That's when it hit me. Rick wasn't incompetent or fooled. Rick was in on it. How much is she paying you? Excuse me? Karen, how much is she paying you to look the other way? Rick's face flushed red. Mr. Miller, you're making serious accusations without any evidence. I think we're done here. After he left, I sat on my porch watching the morning rush at Karen's operation. Families arriving for fishing trips, couples renting paddle boats, kids running toward the water with their tackle boxes. The perfect picture of innocent recreation. Except now, I knew it was all built on fraud, forgery, and bribes. My phone rang. Janet Mills, my neighbor, sounding worried. Tom, I heard you were bothering county officials this morning, making wild accusations, threatening people. Where did you hear that? It's all over the neighborhood's social media group. People are saying you're having some kind of breakdown, harassing government workers, making up conspiracy theories about permit fraud. I opened my laptop and checked the local Facebook groups. Sure enough, there were posts about my erratic behavior and unfounded allegations against local business owners. Someone had shared a video of Rick Morrison shaking his head sadly outside my house, talking about mental health concerns and the importance of getting help before these situations escalate. Karen had turned my investigation into evidence of my instability. That afternoon, I got a visit from Sheriff Deputy Martinez. Mr. Miller, I need to talk to you about some harassment complaints. What harassment complaints? We've received multiple reports about you making threatening phone calls to county officials, showing up at government offices, making false accusations, and generally creating a public disturbance with conspiracy theories. I showed him my documentation, the forged signatures, the timeline inconsistencies, the IP address evidence. Martinez looked through it all with professional patience. This is interesting research, Mr. Miller. Have you considered taking this to the FBI? Fraud across state lines is a federal matter. You think I should contact federal authorities? I think you should do whatever makes you feel better. Just do it quietly, without bothering your neighbors or local officials. Martinez handed back my papers. Because right now, you're developing a reputation as someone who can't accept when he's wrong. After he left, I walked down to the pond's edge. The chain link fence was decorated now with hand-painted signs from visiting children. Thank you for the fun day. Best fishing ever. Karen's Lake is awesome. My father's bobber had been joined by a whole collection of colorful floats that customers were using. Red and white cork mixed with bright plastic bobbers in every color imaginable. Like my dad's memory was getting lost in a carnival of strangers' fishing gear, Madison approached with her camera, probably hoping to get footage of the unhinged neighbor for her social media story. Mr. Miller, I'm doing a documentary about community recreation access. Would you like to share your perspective? My perspective on what? On learning to share natural resources with families who might not otherwise have access to outdoor experiences. I stared at her. She was good. Really good. Turning property theft into a story about community sharing, turning fraud into a narrative about outdoor access for underprivileged families. No comment. I understand this might be difficult for you. Change is hard, especially when we've been used to having something all to ourselves for a long time. That evening, I tried calling the FBI field office. The agent who answered listened to my story with professional courtesy. Mr. Miller, local permit disputes usually fall under county jurisdiction. Have you tried working with local authorities? Local authorities are compromised. That's a serious allegation. Do you have evidence of corruption? I started explaining about Rick Morrison, about the forged signatures, about the IP addresses. Halfway through, I realized how I sounded, like every conspiracy theorist who'd ever called law enforcement with evidence that only made sense to them. Sir, I'm going to suggest you document everything carefully and take it to your county prosecutor's office. If there's genuine fraud, they'll know how to handle it. But the county prosecutor's office was the same system that had already dismissed my evidence, the same system where Rick Morrison worked, where Commissioner Walsh's signature could be forged without consequences, where Karen's consulting firm could operate with impunity. That night, I stood at my kitchen window watching families pack up their gear after another successful day at Karen's Lake Resort. Kids tired and happy, parents relaxed and satisfied, everyone grateful for the wonderful experience Karen had provided. She'd created something that looked so legitimate, so beneficial, so community-minded that questioning it made me seem petty and selfish. She'd turned theft into generosity, fraud into public service, and me into the villain trying to ruin everyone's fun. But I had one advantage Karen didn't know about. 43 years ago, my father had taught me that the most important battles aren't won with force or anger or even evidence. They're won by patience, persistence, and knowing your enemy better than they know themselves. Karen thought she'd neutralize me by destroying my credibility, but she'd also made one crucial mistake. She'd shown me exactly how her system worked. The next morning, I did something that would have surprised everyone who thought they knew me. I walked down to Karen's operation and asked to rent a boat. Madison looked up from her cash box, clearly confused. You want to fish here? $50 for 3 hours, right? That's what the sign says. But you live right there. She pointed toward my house. And now I'd like to be a paying customer, unless there's a problem with my money. Karen emerged from the equipment shed, wearing that familiar smirk. Well, finally decided to join the civilized world? Something like that. I handed her 320s. Keep the change. She took my money with obvious amusement. Boat number 4 is available. Life jackets are mandatory, no littering, no alcohol, fishing license required. I have a license. Of course you do. I climbed into the little aluminum boat and paddled toward the center of the pond. For the first time in weeks, I was officially allowed to be on my own water. The irony was thick enough to cut with a fishing knife. But I wasn't there to fish. I was there to watch. Karen's operation was more sophisticated than I'd realized. She had a rotation system for the boats, a reservation book that looked weeks deep, and a steady stream of customers who clearly thought they'd discovered something special. Madison filmed constantly, documenting happy families and satisfied customers for her social media empire. More importantly, I was watching the staff. Karen had hired 4 local teenagers to handle boat maintenance and customer service. Kids I'd seen around town, probably working their first real jobs. They were efficient, friendly, and completely unaware they were part of a criminal enterprise. Around noon, I paddled close to the shore where Karen was handling a customer complaint. A father whose reservation had been double-booked, upset that his family's weekend trip was being disrupted. "I understand your frustration," Karen was saying, "but we're completely booked today. I can offer you a full refund, or you can reschedule for next weekend." We drove 3 hours to get here. My kids have been talking about this for weeks. "Tell you what," Karen lowered her voice, "I can probably squeeze you in at 4 o'clock, but it'll have to be off the books if you know what I mean. Half price, cash only." The father agreed immediately. Cash transaction, no documentation, no trail. Karen was skimming money from her own illegal operation. That evening, I made a phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. My ex-brother-in-law, Danny, who worked for the IRS in their criminal investigation division. "Tom, Jesus, how long has it been?" "Too long, Danny. I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "The kind that involves unreported cash income and tax evasion." Danny laughed. "You're talking my language now. What's the situation?" I explained about Karen's operation, focusing on the financial aspects rather than the permit issues. The cash-only transactions, the off-the-books reservations, the complete lack of sales tax collection or business license compliance. "How much money are we talking about?" "At $50 per customer, 3 hours per boat, 6 boats running 12 hours a day, she's pulling in maybe $4,000 daily, all cash, no documentation. Over a summer season, that's significant unreported income. Send me what you have." The next day, I started my own documentation project. Every cash transaction, every off-the-books deal, every customer who paid without getting a receipt. I bought a small digital camera with a telephoto lens and spent my days as the world's most overpaid fishing customer, recording evidence of systematic tax evasion. Karen noticed my newfound interest in boating. "You know, Tom, when I first started this project, I never expected you to become one of our best customers. It's relaxing out there. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. This doesn't have to be adversarial. There's room for both of us to benefit from this situation." I looked at her with genuine curiosity. "What do you mean?" "Well, you know this area better than anyone. The best fishing spots, the history of the pond, local wildlife. People would pay extra for that kind of expertise." She was offering me a job, working for the people who'd stolen my property. "You want me to be a tour guide?" Think of it as a consulting position, 20% of the guided tour fees, plus you'd get to spend time on the water, doing what you love. Karen smiled like she was offering me the deal of a lifetime. Plus, it would solve our little conflict of interest problem. What conflict of interest? The community relations issue. Some people are still confused about the property ownership situation. Having you as part of the team would send a clear message that everything's legitimate and above board. She wanted to buy my silence with a cut of the profits from my own stolen property. That's an interesting offer. Take your time thinking about it. But Tom, this operation isn't going anywhere. I've got too much invested, too many people depending on the jobs and recreation opportunities. The smart move is to join us rather than keep fighting us. That night, I called Danny back. "I've got everything you need. Financial records, video evidence, witness testimony. This woman's been running a cash-only operation all summer without reporting a dime. It's send it all to me. IRS criminal investigation takes tax evasion very seriously, especially when it's connected to other illegal activities. How long before you can move on it?" "Depends on the evidence quality. But Tom, if what you're telling me is accurate, she's looking at serious federal charges, tax evasion, operating without proper licenses, unreported business income. We're talking years in prison, not just fines. I hung up feeling like I'd finally found Karen's weakness. She'd been so focused on forging local permits and bribing county officials that she'd forgotten about the one government agency that nobody can buy off or fool indefinitely. The IRS doesn't care about community relations or social media campaigns. They care about unreported income and unpaid taxes. 2 days later, I was out in boat number 4 when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A small crowd had gathered on the shore, and Karen was making some kind of announcement. We're excited to announce that Karen's Lake Resort is going to become a permanent fixture in our community. We've purchased the surrounding property and will be expanding operations year-round. She held up a thick folder of documents. Everything's been approved by the county, and we'll be breaking ground on our visitor center next month. The crowd applauded. Madison filmed everything. Local officials nodded approvingly. And my father's bobber, 43 years old and faded from decades of sun and weather, drifted past the celebration like a ghost of everything that used to matter. Karen had just announced that she was keeping my pond forever. But what she didn't know was that federal agents were already building a case that would bring her whole empire crashing down. The question was whether they'd move fast enough to save what was left of my father's legacy. 3 weeks later, I was sitting on my porch with my morning coffee when the black SUVs rolled down Maple Lake Road. Not 1 or 2 vehicles, a whole convoy. IRS Criminal Investigation, FBI Economic Crimes Unit, State Environmental Enforcement, and county sheriff's deputies bringing up the rear. Karen was in the middle of her morning customer briefing when Agent Sarah Chen, the same reporter who'd ambushed me with questions, except she wasn't a reporter, walked up with her badge out and a warrant in her hand. Karen Davis, you're under arrest for tax evasion, fraud, and operating an illegal business enterprise. I watched from my kitchen window as they handcuffed both Karen and Madison, while confused families stood around holding their fishing poles and boat rental receipts. The kids working the dock looked terrified, probably wondering if they were about to be arrested too. Agent Chen saw me watching and walked over after they had loaded the women into separate vehicles. Mr. Miller, Danny Morrison asked me to thank you. Your documentation was exactly what we needed to build the case. Danny Morrison? Your brother-in-law. He's been coordinating this investigation for the past month. She pulled out a thick folder. Turns out Karen Davis has been running similar operations in 3 other states. Always the same pattern. Forge local permits, bribe small-town officials, operate cash-only businesses without paying taxes. What happens now? Well, the good news is your property rights are fully restored. All those fake permits and zoning changes have been voided. The bad news is you've got a mess to clean up. That was an understatement. Karen's operation had left behind boat docks, picnic tables, portable toilets, electrical connections, and enough garbage to fill a dumpster. The pristine pond my father had created was littered with the debris of her fake resort. But there was something else I hadn't expected. As word spread about the arrests, people started showing up. Not customers looking for boat rentals, neighbors offering to help. Tom Brewster arrived with his pickup truck. Heard you might need a hand cleaning up this mess. Janet Mills brought her grandchildren and a cooler full of sandwiches. The kids wanted to help restore the pond to how it used to be. Even Rick Morrison, the code enforcement officer, showed up in his county truck. Turns out he hadn't been bribed, he'd been threatened. Karen's consulting firm had dirt on his gambling debts and had been using it to force his cooperation. I'm sorry, Tom. I should have stood up to them, but they had me scared I'd lose my job and my family would find out about my problems. We spent 2 weeks removing every trace of Karen's operation. The boats, the docks, the signs, the fencing. Slowly, the pond began to look like itself again. But here's the thing about getting what you want back. Sometimes it's not quite the same as what you lost. The water was still beautiful, the fish were still biting, and my father's bobber still hung from the willow tree. But I couldn't unsee all those families who genuinely enjoyed their time here. Kids who'd caught their first fish, couples who'd had romantic boat rides, grandparents who'd shared peaceful mornings on the water. Karen had stolen my pond, but she'd also shown me how much joy it could bring to other people. So I made a decision that probably would have surprised everyone, including myself. I kept it open. Not as Karen's Lake Resort with its $50 fees and fake permits. Just as Miller's Pond, the way it had always been. Free access for anyone who wanted to fish or paddle around in the quiet water. No reservations, no commercial operations, no cameras documenting every moment for social media. I put up a simple sign by the trail, Miller's Pond, public fishing. Welcome, please respect the wildlife and each other. Word spread slowly through the community. Families started coming back, but quietly this time. Kids learning to cast from the same spots where I'd learned 43 years ago. Couples finding peaceful moments away from the noise of everyday life. The difference was, now they knew it was a gift, not a business transaction. Karen got 18 months in federal prison for tax evasion and fraud. Madison got probation and community service. Turns out she really didn't know about her mother's criminal activities. Rick Morrison got counseling for his gambling addiction and kept his job with the county. I got my pond back, but I also learned something about sharing that my father never had the chance to teach me. Some things become more valuable when you give them away freely instead of having them stolen and sold. On quiet Sunday mornings, when the mist rises off the water and the only sound is a fishing line hitting the surface, I can still see that red and white bobber hanging from its willow branch. 43 years of memories, joined now by new ones being made by strangers who've become neighbors. My father would have liked that, I think. He always said the best fishing spots were the ones you could share without losing anything that really mattered. Have you ever had something stolen from you, only to discover that giving it away freely was better than keeping it locked up? Karen taught me a lot of things, most of them by showing me exactly what not to do. But the most important lesson was this: you can't steal someone's generosity, and you can't counterfeit the real thing. These days, Miller's Pond is exactly what it was always supposed to be. Not a business or a battleground, but a place where people can find a little peace in a complicated world. And that red and white bobber, still hanging from its string, still marking the spot where some of life's best lessons get learned one cast at a time.